Thank you. Mr. President, this debate we're having about gun legislation, how to solve a difficult problem, is a good debate. And quite frankly, I never understood why we would not want to have this debate. This is an issue that most Americans very much would like to see something of substance accomplished. But the goal is to do something of substance that will address the underlying problem, not just pass legislation, quite frankly, in the more feel-good category. To Senator Manchin and Toomey, you're very sincere. I know you're trying to fix a problem that's seen by a lot of people to be a problem. I understand where you're coming from. I would like to take my time to talk about two things. The President has given a lot of speeches about this issue, very emotional in nature. The State of the Union speech, he's literally traveled all over the country to kind of gin up support for three things: a universal background check, banning assault weapons, assault rifles, and limiting magazine sizes. And at the end of the day, the Senate will take up these measures individually and somewhat collectively. And here's what I think will happen. I think when it comes to the magazine size limitation, that's not going to pass the Senate, simply because there are thousands, if not millions, of magazines beyond 10 rounds out into the current marketplace. From a criminal point of view, this legislation wouldn't affect them one bit. They'll get a magazine size, whatever size they would like. It would affect law-abiding citizens and put you in a bad spot. The best way to interrupt a shooter in a Newtown situation is not to limit the magazine size, but to have a security officer in the school that can confront the shooter before they get to the kids. Don't kid yourself that having to reload is going to be the answer to interrupting a crazy person bent on destroying lives of innocent people. The best way in a school environment, in my view, is to confront that shooter with a trained law enforcement officer. And the Grassley-Cruz-Graham amendment has money put back into the system that President Obama cut $300 million out of school safety at a time when I think that was very unwise. We restore that money. But 2 months ago, maybe a little bit longer, there was a young woman at home in Atlanta suburbs with her two twin daughters. I believe they're twin daughters. There was a home invasion by someone who had just been released from jail. She took her children up into the closet on the second floor and hid in the closet, got on the phone, cell phone call with her husband, asking what to do. She grabbed a .38 revolver. The guy broke into the closet. She fired 6 times, emptied the gun, hit him 5 of the 6 times. He was still able to get up and drive away. About 1/3 of the assaults in this country are committed by more than one person. In the hands of that mother, 6 shots were not enough. Wouldn't bother me one bit if she had 30 rounds. In the hands of a mentally unstable person or a convicted felon, 1 bullet is one too many. That's why I'm going to oppose the magazine sizes. I think it doesn't address the problem. Now, as to the AR-15, there are 4 million of these rifles available. It's one of the most popular selling sportsman's rifles in the country. I've been in the military for almost 30 years. It's similar to the M16, but it's a semi-automatic, not a fully automatic rifle. The reason I own one is I like to shoot. I'm not going to bother anybody. I'm not going to do anything wrong with the gun. I passed a background check to get the rifle. Why an AR-15? Vice President Biden, who's a good friend, has suggested that a double-barrel shotgun is the best way to defend a home in case you find a lawless environment where you've had a hurricane, an earthquake, or a natural disaster where law enforcement is really not available to your family because the system is broken. They can't call, they can't travel. There's been a catastrophic event. Sandy, Hugo, Katrina. These things happen in the real world where law and order breaks down. And he was talking to a young man who was worried about that. Says, you don't need an AR-15. You need a double-barrel shotgun. That's the best way to defend your home. To be honest with you, I disagree. If there's a roving gang in a community and there's 3 homes, one without a gun, one with a double-barrel shotgun, and one with an AR-15, they're going to pick the AR-15 home last. Now, you may not agree with me, but I think that makes sense as a self-defense weapon. So that's why the assault ban's not going to pass. Less than, I think, 2 or 3% of all murders in this country are committed with a rifle of any kind. Most of the murders committed in this country, violent acts with a gun, are committed with handguns. At the end of the day, the magazine limitation's not going to fail because it really doesn't address the problem. In the hands of a mother, 6 rounds are not enough. Hands of a criminal, 1's too many. The AR-15, 4 million guns available, assault weapons, very popular selling gun. I think under Heller, that type weapon would be protected. It's not the gun you own, it's who owns it. And at the end of the day, the universal background check is not going to make it. Senator Manchin and Toomey are trying to find a solution in a smaller way. I appreciate that. But here's my concern about background checks. Last year, 80,000 people failed a background check. 9,000 of the people who failed the background check were convicted felons on the run from the law. And 44 people were prosecuted out of 80,000. Of those 9,000, I can't find one case where the law enforcement community found out that a criminal on the run from the law tried to buy a gun and went and picked him up. I mean, at least we ought to be catching dumb criminals. If you're dumb enough to fill out a background check while you're on the run, the system ought to catch you. Let me tell you another problem we found. In 2005, there was a young lady named Alice Boland, who's a paranoid schizophrenic, very troubled young lady, history of mental illness, who pled not guilty by reason of insanity to trying to kill the President of the United States and a Secret Service agent. The threats were made in South Carolina at the Canadian border, and she eventually came to South Carolina with her family. She was adjudicated by a federal court, pled not guilty by reason of insanity. The plea was accepted. She was confined to a mental health institution by the court. When she got out, she went home. February of this year, she went to Walterboro, a small community near Charleston, and bought a .22 semi-automatic pistol, filled out the background check, and her not reasoned by insanity not guilty plea was not entered into the background system. The fact that she was confined to a mental health institution by a federal court didn't make it into the background check system. She bought the gun, went to a private school, Ashley Hall, a private school in Charleston, and went into the staff, the office area where the staff was located, pulled out the gun, and the gun didn't fire. Thank God it didn't. But our background system doesn't catch people like her. There are 14,000 people in South Carolina that have been adjudicated a danger to themselves and others by a competent court with due process that are not into the federal background system. They may be up to 1 million people. The Grassley-Cruz-Graham bill would fix that problem. It would make sure that before you get a law enforcement grant from the federal government, the state who requests the grant, you got to enter into the federal database people who have been held in mentally a danger to themselves or others by a competent court. Looks like we could at least do that to get thousands, if not up to 1 million people who have been deemed to be danger to themselves or others into the background system before you would expand it. So I support Grassley-Cruz-Graham. I think it's got a comprehensive approach. It has an anti-trafficking component to it. It has a task force that will have $50 million, I believe, available to the federal law enforcement community to go after people who fail a background check or are felons. I think is a much better approach than the other legislation on the floor. So I will be opposing Manchin-Toomey. I appreciate the spirit in which it was authored. I think expanding the background check system is not the problem. Making the background system capture mental health adjudications and doing something about a felon who fails the background check is a wiser approach rather than expanding a broken system. And when you have 44 people out of 80,000 prosecuted, something's wrong. Why create more paperwork where nobody's going to do something about it? Let's focus on the problem. So I think this has been a good debate for the Senate. I think when it's all said and done, after a reasoned debate, the President's proposals, more emotional than they were practical, of a universal background check, which would have included a private sale, no matter what you say. At the end of the day, these proposals are not going to carry the day in the Senate. We should be going after the criminal, not the law-abiding citizen, and all of us should want to make sure that those who are a danger to themselves and others do not have access to a weapon. I think that is a common sense approach to a hard problem. I look forward to the votes today and votes to come because this is an issue that should be debated. I'm not afraid to voice the courage of my convictions. Everyone in this body is sincere about their approach to the problem. But I think at the end of the day, what's going to prevail here is common sense. With that, I'll yield.